Gregg Smith, thanks very much for joining the show today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you on the show. You've done quite a bit. And to start with the clean up palettes, walk me through memory lane. How do you become an executive in the cybersecurity space?
It's sort of an interesting story, but earlier in my career, I spent a fair amount of time in the wireless and mobile space. And I ended up transitioning from that arena where I was president of a public company and CEO of a couple smaller wireless companies. And ironically, the threat vector in mobile phones was pretty significant. And I transitioned directly from mobility into mobile security. And that was a logical transition for me. And I'm very grateful that it happened because, I've spent the last 15 years in the cybersecurity space trying to protect a little bit of everything.
So you kind of jump over quite a bit. So if you don't mind, let me let me put on the thread in the sweater. Um, so so first and foremost, you kind of transition from mobility to cyber, but as you mentioned, there's the intersection between the two.
Sure.
How did you become in the telco and the kind of the mobility space? Maybe walk me through how do you got there. And it's really interesting because I think it's in the cybersecurity space, there's always a intersection between something and something, right?
Sure.
Meaning, and that's why it's really important for people like yourself to come from a particular space, and regardless whether it's hospitality, healthcare, in your case, mobility, and moving to cyber, because we really do need that kind of expertise to overlap.
I couldn't agree more. And, I think what was interesting to the investors in Coolspan, which was my first cybersecurity company, was the fact that I had come from both a government as well as enterprise, running those type of organizations. And at the end of the day, from a mobility standpoint, we really needed to protect the voice and text messaging that was going on in a big enterprise or in the government. Coolspan was one of the early innovators in that space, as was Silent Circle, both companies I was CEO, as we were trying to, protect the communications of senior level executives, government officials, the military. And while there were, very expensive and robust solutions out there, what we were trying to do was create very simple applications that could be used on a standard cell phone and be utilized around the world.
And it's amazing. Fast forward all those years, it is still in the headline. So just from reviewing what happened recently with the head of Telegram, the CEO of Telegram, and you're smiling, grinning because you know where I'm going with this.
Sure.
It's still, after all those years, there's still a lot to do with the privacy and confidentiality of communication through mobile devices, and the requirements for government entities or otherwise to access that. And I couldn't think about a better person than yourself to ask that question. Why has it always been such a big deal, and why we are still, after all those years, we still haven't solved the issues?
I mean, when you think about our mobile device, it's just like a computer, right? You have the hardware itself, you have the operating system, and then you have, thousands of applications. So when you think about the threat vector of a mobile device, it's very, very significant, from the baseband processor through, again, the OS and then the apps. But if you just think about the real basic fundamental core cell phone application, it's you and I talking on a cell phone. And then, of course, the next prevalent one, maybe even more prevalent today, is text messaging. And unfortunately, as you look about, kind of the United States, we can start there, there's really been no mandate or regulatory policy that says that we need to have secure communications as we talk or as we text. And, at the end of the day, if the military is going to go into a fight, they don't care. They're just going to call up on their cell phone and say, go, and off they go. But, that threat of intercepting that communication is probably too late. But if you think about bankers talking to executives or CFOs talking to the CFO about a merger and an acquisition, those communications are still all done in the clear. And what I mean by that is just over the standard protocol. And unfortunately, it's so easy to intercept those communication links. I mean, you can buy something over the counter today, for a couple $100, and I can listen in on your telephone conversation. I have the ability to download an app on someone's cell phone and intercept, their text messaging. So why hasn't that been regulated yet is beyond me. And I think that the companies that, like Silent Circle, Oracle, Span, Wicker, etc., are waiting for that big thing to happen. And certainly there has been big things that have happened, right? Certainly many times up in New York, the white van is across the street from a board meeting listening in to a potential merger. And all of a sudden, organized crime can make an awful lot of money by either shorting the stock or buying the stock and hoping that it's going to go up. So, shame on the policymakers at this point because they haven't really done much about that.
And isn't it similar to the internet problem as a whole? Meaning, when the internet was created, it was based on open protocols. Security was never by design, and I think there's a lot of similarities on the telecommunication aspect of thing. It was, by design, it wasn't meant to be secure. It was just meant to connect people from, dot to dot. And so now you're trying to take something that inherently open and trying to build a security on top of that, which makes it so much more complicated. Is that a correct assumption?
It's an absolute correct assumption. And I think that, Apple has done a phenomenal job, and certainly Samsung with Samsung Knox has done a really good job of, trying to create solutions that, really can help you as the end user. But at the end of the day, it's far from perfect. And then again, when you think about the cell phone today, you have cellular communications, you have Bluetooth, you have Wi-Fi, you have Zigbee, you have NFC. So there's all these new wireless protocols that are built into the device itself. And each one of those is vulnerable. And as you said, the internet is one of the key connection points. So, the device itself is fundamentally insecure.
Yeah, and even when you're using one of those mobile apps, right, like a Signal or Telegram or WhatsApp, there's still, I'm going to be silent there for a second because there's still a lot of gaps, right?
Unequivocally, yeah. I mean, certainly, Signal would probably be the most pervasive secure application that's used here in the United States, but a lot of people think WhatsApp is secure, but you have to look at who the owner is. And certainly you mentioned it earlier that the Telegram CEO was compromised. So, at the end of the day, none of us are safe. There's always someone that's trying to steal our information, whether it's our financial information, our health information. Intellectual property is obviously a huge opportunity for our adversaries. So, it's just not a perfectly secure environment at this point in time.
So, Greg, if an executive sit and listen to this podcast and they're thinking to themselves, you're right. There's, if I sit in the boardroom or I'm having a confidential communication with someone else, and a lot of them are now traveling everywhere. You can be in the Bahamas or anywhere really, and make some really huge business decisions or even life altering decision over the phone, whether when I'm talking about voice or text or messaging. What can you do? And, coming from you again, it has some clout to it. What can you do to elevate that communication security and there's really no silver bullet, but you can always kind of like make it difficult or more difficult to intercept that communication.
Yeah, in my current role, one of the things that we do is we evaluate products on behalf of the government. And we have seen at least one company that's built a very secure phone. The question is, there's a price point that's associated with creating a device that is ultra secure. At Silent Circle, we built the black phone. Boeing built a different variation of the black phone. The price point was big. We did a pretty extensive product evaluation on a phone from Celterra, and it was darn good. It was very good. I also think that utilizing some of the applications that we talked about, Signal or one of the other secure apps, the Silent Circle app is still out there today. CoolSpan's still out there today, and there's others. Are they perfect? No, but are they a heck of a lot better than what you would use with your standard cell phone? Absolutely. I do think that, there are also companies out there today that are doing executive and celebrity protection. Utilizing some of those services, especially, at a very senior level of a public company, I think is vital to ensure, that those strategic decisions that you described earlier are protected.
And so it's not just the phone itself, but you also make sure that the other side has either the same device or you have the control over the event. And I think that's one of the major points. And then to add complexity to it, now with deep fake and the ability to replicate your voice and even your face in real time, you can't even trust potentially a Zoom communication. We've seen that before, right? Recently with a $25 million wire transfer.
Yeah, unequivocally. I mean, those type of things happen all the time. The one thing that I would say is most of the secure devices require peer-to-peer communication, meaning you have the application, I have the application, and that provides the security. That's the same with the Celterra phone. You have to have, both of you have to have that phone to talk in that secure manner. The challenge that we always had when I was CEO of the mobile companies was the fact that the end customer always wanted to have the flexibility of Apple talking to Android. And that's where the challenge became very difficult. And as you think about the cell phone manufacturers themselves and the fact that they're constantly innovating and building a new device, it becomes very, very costly for a smaller company to keep up with all the versions of the device and the OS and making sure that there's cross-compatibility across that ecosystem. And that becomes the challenge. And I think that was one of the biggest reservations that the government and the enterprise had with buying those type of solutions, which is, I've got, my CFO carries a Samsung and I carry an Apple and someone else carries, a different device. And how do you keep up with all the version control of all those devices? It becomes a very complex problem.
And so what do actual officials, do they resort to analog communication, like the secure phone that it sits on the desk is typically red and it has a point-to-point connection, physical connection. It's almost like I heard that the Russians have gone back to pen and paper in some application because they know it cannot be hacked easily. You have to physically be there. So is that what's happening, or government executive is still, they still rely heavily on like maybe devices that are insecure?
So there's two answers to that question. The first is that when they're talking on their personal devices, very often they're speaking in the clear. We do have very secure devices in the government today. You mentioned the red phone, that is certainly exists, but the good news is that our government does a phenomenal job of creating solutions where we can talk very, very securely, um, but it's just not using the standard device.
Yeah. So either way, security, and this is again the underlying issue is that security was never. There was always a slightly conflict between security and ease of use, or usability,
Yep.
and that's true in all across the board, including the communication. And then recently, there was a an article, a publication that was saying, okay, the telcos, there's some sort of U.S. government is listening on a wide scale to telecommunication. And there was an article that's published saying that, well, there's somebody else that's listening to what we're listening to, meaning that there's some nation state that are using our infrastructure to the one that we use to listen to us, making the whole surveillance, for nation state very, very complex. And I know that what's happening when you are having communication today, it's most likely using voice over IP, and it does flow through the internet. It's long time ago, it used to actually flow into like wires, but now it's all. So, and yes, there's encryption, but yes, we know that there's also ways to decrypt it now with all various means. So again, we're moving into a very high complexity where it's almost like who is there for. There's a race to okay, somebody is feeling secure communication, but somebody else is making sure that there's no secure communication on the other side, and encrypting that. Where are we going with it?
Well, unfortunately, we always talk about building a bigger wall, right? And, we build a bigger wall, they figure out ways to get through the wall or over the wall. Then we try to add additional layers of security on top of that. And then they figure out a way to do, to get back in. I would say we're equally as good as our adversaries at doing the same things. And you're right. There was just a recent article about the Russians, having the ability to be in our telco environment and listen in. The reality of that situation is true. There is great communication technologies out there today for cellular intercept, as well as having the ability to break into, the water system or the hospital or your home. So, at the end of the day, it's how do we create a layered approach to the defense, that allows or doesn't allow, our adversaries to get in. And that's the game of cybersecurity. That's the game of our modern warfare today.
And if somebody was leading the path, because I would say that the private industry is always one of the the trailblazers for any area, because they're motivated by generating income and revenue and making money, but it also lends itself to be the top, this spearheading innovation in every particular area. So if you were looking to create yet another secure communication technology like you did, because you had such a great experience with Silent Circle and otherwise, which by the way was amazing phone. I still remember like it was amazing. I wanted one. I didn't find a reason why I should have one, but
Right.
it was super cool. Just the
Yeah.
concept to have and I think it was I don't know, it would probably become a status symbol to a lot of people. It would be like almost like a James Bond kind of thing, where if somebody actually recognized you had that phone, it would have been some sort of status symbol, especially if you go to some of the cybersecurity conventions. But if you had the ability to go out there and recreate something today, knowing all the things you know today from creating these companies, what would you do? What type of technology would you adopt?
I think, and I'm sure you've heard the term zero trust before, and zero trust is essentially a philosophy where you stack multiple technologies on top of one another to create, a very comprehensive overall solution. I really think that that's the way that we need to go. Unfortunately, I don't know that there's enough money to stack all these different solutions together to create a company, but certainly, the bigger companies, the CrowdStrikes and the Palo Altos of the worlds are trying to, accomplish that in one solution. And, they have the M&A power to go off and buy point solutions to add to that stack. Clearly I think that the security buyer in the enterprise wants to simplify their solution. A lot of the CISOs that I talk to have 30 to 60 different technologies trying to secure their enterprise. And at the end of the day, they really would just like one throat to choke, right? They wish they could call, David and Gregg's company where we could be accountable for that whole solution stack, but there's, nobody's accomplished that yet. But I do like the zero trust principle, or the zero trust philosophy. Getting there is painful. And certainly you see, the US government DoD CIO shop really working hard to try to make a zero trust solution set pervasive in DoD, by 2027. I hope that it gets there.
Yeah, it's not that directive, and it's just like setting up a standard is the way to go, and maybe it's not everybody's going to get to by 2027 because it requires such a heavy lifting and it's also the implementation of it is just required. There's maybe zero trust in mobile, zero trust in networking, zero trust in endpoints, zero trust in applications, zero trust in data. And also, so the problem is now, how do you go ahead and where do you start? So let's say you wanted to, it's just if you want, I'm a CEO of an enterprise, and I see Gregg as an expert, and it makes total sense. Where do I start? If I look at my organization, where do I start? What's the easiest or the biggest bang for the buck from implementation and maybe some key takeaways that we can take from this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to start with identity and access management. So kind of an ICAM solution. That's a starting point. Multi-factor authentication, we always talk about that, but that's another key component. Privilege, right? Does David have the same privilege as the CFO that I do as the CIO? It's those type of things that are the basic building blocks of zero trust that I think are key. But as you mentioned, it goes far beyond that, right? There's, the endpoint, there's the mobile device. The one thing that you didn't mention is, what about the operational technology that I'm using on my manufacturing floor, or in my power plant, or in my water filtration system for a county? That's a whole nother area that DoD CIO is now starting to talk about. But that critical infrastructure that we have is vital, because it doesn't take a lot of fentanyl to go into our water system, and we could have a massive, catastrophe on our hands.
And that has its own set of challenges, because some of those systems, whether it's, SCADA systems or operation technology, as you mentioned, a lot of it is legacy, quote unquote. Maybe it's been there for so many years. And again, it was the same issue apply. It wasn't built by design to be secure. And even air gaps don't necessarily, even if it's not connected to the outside world, even air gap doesn't necessarily mean that it's secure. And we've seen incident where just with the shipping company that, the boat that somehow went into the bridge, and it's not clear exactly what happened, but things like that are it's almost like somebody was litmus testing the ability to control. Again, call it conspiracy theory, but I've seen like the video of like the shipping, like this enormous boat just turn its lights off and it just goes slowly, or fairly slowly, right into the bridge, into the absolute critical point in the infrastructure, and it still has an impact today. So how do we, with all those set of challenges, how does like a municipality or a water filtration, water treatment organization, how do they start protecting their infrastructure? It's such a
Yeah.
big heavy lift.
It's a massive heavy lift, and you're right. A lot of those systems are legacy systems. A lot of those systems don't have the ability to do patch management over the air or over the internet. So, the great thing is that there's a lot of really up and coming innovative companies that are doing work in that space. You have multiple companies in Maryland. Dragos is one that's doing, great work. Tenable has done some great work. That's a great public company in Maryland. And you have lots of other smaller companies that are doing very innovative, more point solutions, right? Some are focused on water filtration systems. Some are focused on the power grid. Some are focused on the telco space. The challenge is that our adversaries are really, really good, just like we are. And, there's, as I said, you put up a solution and they figure out a way to get in or look at another way of getting in. And that's the challenge that we have in the industry. That's what makes the industry so fascinating to me, because, there's always a better mousetrap. There's always something different. There's always a new threat. And at the end of the day, and I hate to say it, a lot of our adversaries are gunning to take us down. They do not like the
And
United States being number one.
it is very, very true. And I don't think people realize that on a day-to-day basis. They should. You get up in the morning, you're decide, okay, should I put too sugar in my coffee or should I go lean and put none? So that we there's so many decisions we're making by the time it 10 o'clock rounds around. We're not thinking about existential risks, from nation states and other ways, but they're out there, and I think there's quite a large population in the U.S. that day to day that's what they're doing. They're trying to protect the United States from adversaries. And speaking of new threats, right? Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you bring that up, and we as American citizens expect the internet to work, right? We expect to be able to hop on Wi-Fi at our home. We expect the water to work. We expect, the television to work. Well, when it doesn't, people get upset really very, very quickly, right? So, we've been blessed, I think, with the fact that nothing like that has happened that is talked about. But if something catastrophic were to happen, watch how the world in the United States would change, right? There'd be an upheaval, right? It just would be a problem.
We're 3 meals away from chaos, Greg. I think that's what it's saying.
You nailed it. But we also have a massive workforce shortage in the cybersecurity space, and we're working diligently. So many organizations are working diligently to try to fill that workforce gap, but the numbers are somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million jobs are open in our space. We have 30,000 open jobs in Maryland that we're trying to figure out how to hire people. And we're just now starting to really work to bring more diversity into that workforce, whether they're, they're a person of ethnic origin, women, neurodiverse. We need as much help as we can possibly get. Our adversaries think differently, and we need people that think differently to join our workforce. And we pay really well. Our average starting salary is probably somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 a year. It's a great paying job.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about how you see that path, because I get hit by a lot of people on a day-to-day basis saying, listen, I've done these courses, I've taken these undergrad degree, and I'm just looking for experience. I'm looking to, and a lot of these companies don't hire without experience. It's like the catch-22. They want you to come with some sort of tool set already in your arsenal. And I think that's where the disconnect. There's a lot of I would say mid-level jobs and maybe like, high-level job, but not as many entry-level jobs to let people in.
You're right. And as an employer, I think we all have an obligation in the cybersecurity space to help train, the younger generation or the career changers. In the state of Maryland, we've got a very active apprenticeship program, but I don't see a lot of employers embracing that. There's active intern programs as well, where the state will, pay some of the salary of the intern to come work at your organization. But we have more work to do. We had 12 interns this summer at the Technology Advancement Center, and some of them are off to get great jobs. We had one of our college graduates that had interned with us for a year. He got a great paying job at Booz Allen Hamilton. We helped him get a security clearance. That's another challenge for our workforce, especially, in and around the Maryland, Virginia, DC area with so many cleared jobs. We have to help the younger people and the career changers get clearances. And we need more organizations like mine or more funding that can provide the hands-on training, whether it's a hospital or a port or an airport, with that real-world hardware and software, but give them the opportunity to do the work so they can, get into the government.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because a lot of this, what you just described, it's unknown to people, and I think this is why this type of podcasts are really important, because when somebody is entering the field, there's a lot of things they don't know. And for example, that you can get clearance, and that's something that really is useful, very useful for certain types of jobs. So by itself, it elevates yourself to become more, more applicable for that particular role, or more attractive for that particular role. And it doesn't cost money. It's just a matter of going out there and going through the process of getting cleared. And then the apprenticeship pieces, I don't know if a lot of employers even know that they can leverage this government funding for that. And it's a great way for somebody who's just starting out to look for these internship roles with hands-on experience, entry level. And so I think people are traditionally, they go out, do a boot camp, maybe some programming, pen testing.
Yep.
And then they go trying to get a job at the public sector. And then it's like they're getting frustrated that they applied to 500, jobs and don't get anything. But this is great. So what you describe is another way to really get yourself situated to be successful in the field, even just starting out.
Yeah, you touched on a couple different things there. First off, I think we have to get our kids early, right? So, the Fort Meade Alliance, the National Cryptologic Foundation, my organization, we are all working pretty hard on curriculum for, that K through 12 segment of our population. We like to think about influencing them at around 5th grade. And, we partner with both those organizations to create Cyber Saturdays. We work with Junior Achievement. We work with Junior ROTC in an effort to get those kids interested in STEM and learning about cybersecurity and some of the other technologies that are coming up, like AI and quantum computing. And, we'll host 100 kids on a Saturday and put them through a series of 4 different sessions, just giving them a little taste of cybersecurity. But we also talk to the kids about how much money they can make in the field and the steps necessary to get there. I do say that we are challenged in the public sector because the pay is not nearly as good in the public sector as it is in the private sector. But protecting our nation, protecting some of those critical assets that we talked about earlier, are vital to the country's survival. But our philosophy is let's get them in early, let's get them interested. Once they get into college, let's train them at a much higher level. Let's really focus on defending a city and attacking a city, versus more the basic skills that you described earlier. And then, of course, the training that we do for the military is much more advanced than what's being done at the college or university level. But the kids and our career changers need to be trained on the actual systems that are being, that are out there in the wild, right? So it's got to be the PLCs that are used in operational technology. It's got to be, all the gear that an enterprise would use or a doctor's office or a hospital would use. That's the key. And I think at the end of the day, if we do training at that level with that type of equipment, those students are going to become great employees for those particular markets that I just touched on.
And I agree. It has to start early. I've seen some articles where the Army is having a hard time or more difficult time to get a certain quality of candidates, as part of the recruitment process, because due to whatever standards of, physical education or whatever the case may be. And I think that's also very true for what you just described, to bring the people, kids in a younger age, interested in STEM, interested in some areas within cyber. And as you mentioned, it's that curiosity in a young age, because you've seen people that are very proficient and you ask them how they started. Well, I've my parents got me an old radio and I took that apart when I was, 10 years old.
Yep.
And then I couldn't bring it back together, but that's okay. So I started doing something else. But that's how people really become proficient, because by the time they get into high school and college, they have that curiosity, they have the foundation to become like very proficient and maybe looking at cryptography or looking at hacking or being able to protect. So if somebody wants to get involved, let's say a cybersecurity professional listen to this and they want to get involved, and you're spearheading a couple of organizations, what is the easiest way for people to join forces and then maybe potentially gives back to the community some of that time?
I think that you're starting to see a groundswell of that happening today. There's a lot of cybersecurity entrepreneurs that have made money and are doing great things. If you look at the Ron Gula and Cindy Gula, who started Tenable, right? They made a lot of money when their organization went public, and they're very philanthropic. They're giving back millions of dollars, to organizations that are doing cybersecurity training and teaching our youth. And there's a lot of other people out there that are doing that today. Is it enough? Absolutely not. But, there is a groundswell of that. There's people that I see in my organization today, former military folks that are giving back and doing charitable things. If you were to look at my advisory board, it's the who's who of some of the governmental cybersecurity people that I looked up to forever. The Chris Clearys and the Jeff Scheitz and the Karen Gibsons, and I don't mean to leave anybody out, but these are people now that are giving back to the community, and while they're still working, they're really trying to have a positive effect. Look at Harry Coker, who retired and now is the White House's principal cyber director. One of his big focus areas is how do we get these kids, K through 12, excited about STEM and cyber and AI. I mean, he's working tirelessly, speaking around the country at the community colleges and, the primary schools, trying to get kids interested. And that's what that's what we have to do to win.
That's right. Exactly. It's a matter of national security, but we have to start, in order for us to be competitive in 2050, we got to start now.
Unequivocally, look what the Chinese do. they find, kids in 5, 6 years old that have or strengthen, concepts of math. And what do? They put those kids directly into programs to, get great at math. They outnumber us with AI scientists by a huge gap. They have more population, so we've got to do equivalent to what they do, but better.
Yeah, and the issue with that is that the school boards, they're like a large cruise ship. It takes so long to divert it. So I do believe that maybe cyber or some topics in cyber should be taught in the high school level, even the middle school level, and that's not done today. It will take a lot of effort to get that boat turned around, because and then potentially it also has to be, there's only a certain amount of time in the curriculum, so maybe they'll have to take some other areas out. But it's definitely something needed, and I think potentially until we get there, there's a lot of these organizations that are not for profits that are providing the ability for exposure of these younger minds to cyber, and it's a great area to be in. From your experience, right? So you've done well, and it's like the movement from telco to cyber was an eye opener for you, but you are, you're giving back to the community by spearheading some of these efforts.
I mean, philanthropically, we don't have a choice. We have to do that, David. And again, getting the kids interested is paramount. And what I tell my staff is, if we have 100 kids in and we get 3 kids interested, we've done our job, right? We wish we could have 30 of those 100 kids interested, but kids in the early age haven't figured it out yet.
So we talked about macro, and let's talk about micro. Like, imagine, let's say you have a couple kids, your mom or dad. What can you do to have your children interested in the topics? So what would you recommend?
Again, I think you have to expose them to a lot of different things. I have a granddaughter in kindergarten right now. She's learning how to use a computer, right? If we could teach them just the basics of a little bit of cybersecurity, like how important a password is, and it can't be your name or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any of those things, they would be the basic building blocks, would be a great starting point. Having them pay attention to the header when there's a link that comes into an email, right? Just the basics of phishing. That's one of the key things that we always try to teach is that password protection, maybe having multi-factor authentication, but also paying attention to where, that email is coming from is very important. I think
absolutely.
That's the basic starting point. But coming back to your piece on curriculum, you're absolutely right. It takes forever for curriculum to change, but we have to, and we need to start it earlier and now. And it sickens me, just in the state of Maryland, we work with one high school where they only have one computer science class. Then we see other high schools in a different county, that have all kinds of computer classes and in cybersecurity training at a special location. That needs to be pervasive. That just can't be at the wealthier counties.
Yeah, that's right. But again, it's I think that there's a movement in the right direction. I always like to keep positive. With cybersecurity, it's always, there's a lot of negativity and a lot of grumpy people. But I think in general, we're making a progress all across the board. But before we part ways, Greg, just give me an idea. What are you doing today? Talk about your organization. I'd be curious to know, and just for people to understand, because you're spearheading in yet another organization today.
Yeah. So today I run a nonprofit called the Technology Advancement Center, and we really focus on 3 specific areas. We touched a lot today, David, on workforce development. And as I mentioned, we train from 5th grade, through career transition, the military. We do a lot with the college students around the country. So that's one pillar. The second pillar that we focus on is we help small businesses market their products into the government. So we work with a number of government agencies, and they have a list of challenges that they're trying to solve. That could be cybersecurity, it could be AI, and we're starting to see a little bit more on the quantum front. So we bring in these companies for what we call Small Business Wednesdays. They give us really a product demo. And what we do is we've got business people as well as very senior technical people that come out of the government, and we offer help. We might do product evaluations and write a report based on their technology. But our whole goal is, how do we help these small businesses that are doing the big time innovation get connected with the right people in the government? So that's the second pillar. And then the third pillar that we do is companies or the government will give us hard challenges, and we will work on solving those problems. So to give you a great example, one of the senior Pentagon officials wanted a zero trust architecture built on his communications network. We got tasked with that on a Thursday. On a Monday, we had 30 different companies come into our facility for a speed dating event. And by that Thursday, so within a week, we had 8 companies under contract to go off and build this zero trust network on his comms network. And we did that in 68 days. So in some cases, we act as a quick reaction force for the government or the enterprise. It really depends on kind of what gets thrown over our fence, and we try to figure out a very quick and efficient way of solving that problem. You know, we're different, right? We're a nonprofit. We're not out to make money like a traditional systems integrator. So we want to do things quickly, efficiently, and very effectively, and not really try to continue on with a project, where we cost the government millions and millions of dollars. We're very similar to what SoftWorks does for SOCOM or AFWorks does for the Air Force.
And it's so interesting because first of all, it's counterintuitive. You always think about the government as like slow moving entity. When they release, the contract bid, it takes forever. But what you just described is mind blowing to go from bid or providing like the promise and then providing a solution within 2 months period, just over 2 months. It's incredible. I would like to. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but think about the problem of cybersecurity. All of a sudden there's a breach. We don't know what the malware is, right? How do we make something happen instantaneously? Because, finding out that there's malware on a system could lead to a massive shutdown of something or have a catastrophic event. So if there aren't mechanisms or ways that we can solve some of these immediate problems very, very quickly, we're in trouble. And I think organizations like mine have that ability to do that. And we need those type of vehicles to make those things happen in a quick manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the piece where you match private technologies with the government, that public-private partnership is really key. And I've seen this, especially in cyber, where, for example, the FBI is trying to work very closely with enterprise in the private sector, because that partnership again, and being that GUI center, because a lot of companies don't have a clue on how to approach a government contractor. And because there's some magic and some tangible actions you need to take to work. They have requirements. You have to be. You need to have somebody like yourself or your organization to provide that vehicle for those private sector companies to go out and work with the government sector.
You're exactly right, and it's really about building the ecosystem, right? And that's one of the things that we've tried to really open our doors up to is, let's build this ecosystem of cybersecurity companies. And let's say there's a bid for something specific and a systems integrator approaches us. We could say, oh, well, we know this company over here that does really good risk assessment of your supply chain, or we know a company that does something very good in water control systems. And, the bigger that ecosystem becomes, the more powerful I think that data is to solve some of those problems. That's why we were able to get 30 companies in over a weekend that had a little piece of zero trust, to solve that problem. It was no different when the Russians were getting ready to invade the Ukraine. And all of a sudden we realized, well, we don't know a lot about rail security. Well, how do the Russians and Ukrainians move troops and vehicles to, the front lines? It's on rail. So all of a sudden, we look at our ecosystem. Oh, we know this company that does this. Oh, we know this company that does that. And all of a sudden you can bring that in and create a training event to teach people about, the different control systems that a train might have, the different signaling technologies that they use and how to protect or defend those. Those are some of the key things that I think we have to have the ability to do very quickly when there's worldwide conflict.
And let me ask you this: every time you answer, I have two more questions because it's just like my brain just goes. Let me ask you this: so if you're a vendor, how do you, and you want to have all your T's and C's and all your ducks in a row to be attractive to a government entity? What would you recommend? If I'm like a small vendor and in the cyberspace or otherwise, and I work now with the private sector or sell to companies, but now I listen to this and I say, Greg, this is a great idea, but there's certain requirements, right? How do I become more attractive to become part of the chosen one to be able to work with a government entity?
Well, again, I think you have to look at what the publicly stated challenges are by whether it's Cyber Command or one of the other DoD entities. Each one of the works organizations, mine or SoftWorks or AFWorks, et cetera, has things that are somewhat similar to what I described with our Small Business Wednesdays. And that's our goal, right? Is how do we help solve those problems, whether we're identifying companies to solve those problems or the companies are coming to us. So for us, we have a form that's available on our website, and it, asks a series of questions. And then based on the technology and our knowledge of the challenge problems, we say thumbs up or thumbs down. We're usually saying thumbs up because the companies, if they're interested in selling into the government, do a good enough job of their due diligence to know, I've got something that might solve this. And then we'll try to do the matchmaking with the government's problem with that company. And we'll assist anything from helping them with their investor presentations to introductions to those systems integrators or introductions to the government direct. So that's really, we do it. And that's how some of the other entities do it as well.
And that's from the technology perspective. But let's say, is there certain requirements from maybe clearance perspective or just from the DNA of the company, they have to be in a certain way for them to be attractive to work with a government entity?
Yeah. So, here's my experience. If Dave's company has something that is really novel and unique, the government will figure out a way how to get you on contract.
Love this answer, Greg.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it because it shows the agility of the government, meaning it's exactly what you said. Even if you're not perfect, they'll get you to that perfect stage.
Right. And I'll give you a couple examples. Obviously election security is very, very topical right now. Well, there were certain things that our adversaries were doing to manipulate the narrative, right? It's called narrative intelligence. So the government found a couple companies that were very interested in identifying narrative intelligence coming out of Russia that was trying to influence different counties around the country. So that technology of identification of that misinformation became very interesting to the government. So the government, worked with my organization to work with those companies to develop their technology a little bit further than what it was at the time that they found these companies, or we found these companies. So we work with those companies to build in some of the features and benefits that the government was trying to derive. And at the end of last year, both these companies got direct contracts with the government. So, again, if there's something regarding national security, and you as a small business owner in the cyber or AI space thinks you have something that's very novel that the government might want, there are ways that we can help, and other organizations like ours can help to get you those contracts. It's never a guarantee, right? But there are ways of making it happen.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
You got it.
So, last question: what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you to know more about the organization, about the process? Just get some consulting or whatever the case may be to reach out to you. What's the easiest way, Greg?
Yes. So our website is very simple. It's just the TAC, THETAC.tech, TECH. And if you want to participate in Small Business Wednesdays, there's a link, there's a contact us, and, we're happy to help you any way we can.
Phenomenal. I'd like to part ways with something positive. The sky's not falling. Maybe there's something you can say that makes us, have the feel good, 30 seconds, whatever that may be.
I think the one thing that I'll say is, while we've talked a lot about our adversaries and organized crime today and the bad things that they can do, the United States has the best and the brightest cybersecurity professionals, bar none, in the world. And you are being protected by those individuals 24/7, 365, and they're working tirelessly. But I want to leave you with, they are the best in the world.
Amazing, Greg. So good. Thank you very much for joining me today. Much, much appreciated. Looking forward to see where this goes, and just following your steps to see how the organization grows as well. Until then, for all those who joined, thank you very much, and be safe online as well as offline. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.